So making even a terrible movie is super difficult, so it's little surprise that most movies end up fumbling the ball somewhere along the line, even if only for a single unsatisfying scene. The sheer number of factors that can derail even the most simple sequence are beyond count. An off-game actor, a distracted director, or unexpected technical issues on set all can result in major headaches during post-production. But these 10 movie scenes are all, well, not great if we're being kind, with each being called out as a major off-note moment in movies that range from Oscar-winning to Razzie baiting. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 surprising reasons movie scenes were ruined. Number 10. Orlando Bloom forgot to wear his coloured contact lenses. The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a monumental achievement beyond compare, but it was only inevitable that such a gargantuan and ambitious production with so many moving parts would let some mistakes slip through the cracks. Most of the gaffes weren't noticed by the overwhelming majority of viewers, though many fans did point out the distracting inconsistency of Legolas's eye colour throughout the films. Between movies, and even between individual scenes featuring Legolas, his eye colour has a tendency to change from bright blue to his natural brown. According to Peter Jackson, this was due to Bloom struggling to wear the coloured contact lenses during the shoot and outright forgetting to put them on for some scenes, hence the colour shift, which Jackson evidently didn't notice until it was far too late. Number 9. The movie was filmed with multiple Michael Myers masks. Halloween H2O. As Halloween movies go, H2O is pretty damn good and certainly is in the upper half of the series' entries to date, but it also features one of the most hideous and off-putting shots in the entire franchise, with the resulting inclusion of a CGI Michael Myers mask. When Michael kills Charlie, it's painfully obvious in high-definition versions of the film that Michael's mask is a digital creation. The lighting and shape of this mask just look totally off, but this wasn't the result of an unexpected technical issue on set, but that the production team simply hadn't decided what Michael Myers' mask was going to look like in that movie, even though shooting was evidently well underway. Because director Steve Miner hadn't settled on a mask design yet, 3 practical masks were used throughout production, with the different masks noticeable throughout the movie in specific scenes. For the scene with the CGI mask, Michael Myers was shown wearing one of the eventually discarded masks, and so with the scene requiring close-ups of his face and the crew apparently being unable to reshoot it, a VFX mask was superimposed over the top instead. Number 8. Carey Mulligan dubbed her entire performance The Great Gatsby. Baz Luhrmann's 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby received mixed reviews upon release, though one of the more common complaints about the production was the high abundance of obvious ADR dubbing throughout. If you assume that this was down to a simple lack of effort on the part of the movie's sound team, that's really not true, because according to the film's supervising sound editor Wayne Pashley, post-production sound mixing on the film was unexpectedly challenging. Pashley said that due to the noisy nature of the set, the film required thousands of lines of dialogue to be replaced during post-production, and a large percentage of these ended up being for Carey Mulligan's character Daisy Buchanan. When Mulligan came in to re-record her lines, roughly 50% of her dialogue had been queued up for replacement due to the sound being inadequately recorded on set. But Mulligan was unhappy with her original vocal performance, and so she requested that she redub her entire performance. Mulligan was originally meant to spend 8 hours recording ADR for the movie, but ended up spending 3 days re-recording her lines in a voice that she felt was closer to F. Scott Fitzgerald's conception of Daisy in the book. Number 7. Christopher Nolan chose a terrible take of Talia al Ghul's death, The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises is a fittingly bombastic and affecting finale to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, even if it didn't quite match the heights of its predecessors. Yet many fans can't look past an undeniably terrible moment at the end of the movie that has rendered an otherwise pivotal scene in the film an abject laughingstock. The villainous Talia al Ghul is mortally wounded, and in her dying moments she acts out the most hilariously melodramatic death this side of a grade school production, panting heavily and nodding her head violently. It turns a dead serious moment of dramatic catharsis into something more likely to leave audiences giggling, especially as it quickly went viral. Several years later, Marion Cotillard talked openly about the scene, expressing bemusement that director Nolan picked such an obviously terrible take. She said, "Sometimes there are failures, and when you see this on screen you're thinking, why? Why did they keep that take? It was tough to be identified just with this scene, when I'm just doing the best I can can to find the authenticity in every character that I'm playing, it's tough to be known just for this scene. Though most fans initially assumed that Nolan was caught in a tough spot in the editing room and simply didn't have another take to work from, Cotillard made it pretty clear that they filmed numerous takes of the scene and that this was far from her best. Number 6. A plastic baby was used after 2 real babies fell through. American Sniper. American Sniper, a biopic of US Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, was a massive critical and commercial success, yet remains surely the only Best Picture nominated movie in history to try and get away with a blatantly plastic baby. During a scene where Kyle talks to his wife, Kyle holds their newborn daughter, except it's hilariously, distractingly obvious that the baby isn't real. It's egregiously clear that Bradley Cooper is holding a plastic doll, and even tries to subtly move his arms to animate the doll. Now, many immediately assume that this was simply a case of Clint Eastwood, a famously efficient director who typically shoots scenes fast, wanting to cut corners just so that he can wrap up shoots ahead of schedule. But shortly after the scene went viral, the film's screenwriter Jason Hall chimed in and confirmed why Cooper was saddled with a fake baby. He said, "I hate to ruin the fun, but the real baby number 1 showed up with a fever, real baby number 2 was a no-show," and then said in a Clint Eastwood voice, "Give me the doll, kid." In Eastwood's defense, he planned for a real baby and even had a backup in case the first didn't work out, but his contingency also failed him, leading to him having to resort to a doll. Number 5. Composer John Barry insisted upon the slide whistle sound effect, The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun may not be one of the better Bond films, but it does boast an all-timer stunt that remains one of the series' most electrifying. The scene in question sees 007 drive an AMC Hornet over a broken bridge, performing a 360-degree flip in midair and inexplicably landing perfectly on the other side, all while obnoxious J.W. Pepper rides shotgun. Successfully filmed in a single take, it remains a jaw-dropping feat of stunt craftsmanship almost 50 years later, yet is arguably ruined by the presence of an embarrassing and unnecessary sound effect, which is that damn slide whistle. Indeed, a slide whistle can be heard as the car performs the flip, in turn distracting the audience from the awe-inspiring nature of the stunt and making it all feel a little bit silly. If you assume that this was simply the doing of director Guy Hamilton, well, that actually wasn't the case at all. The culprit was none other than the film's legendary composer John Barry, who suggested the slide whistle's inclusion, even though many, including the producer of the film, said that they shouldn't include it. For his part, Barry later expressed regret for suggesting this effect, asserting that it broke the golden rule, as the stunt was a truly dangerous moment, true James Bond style. Thankfully, some fans have now released their own edit of the scene without the slide whistle, but in all official versions of the movie, the garish, cringeworthy sound definitely remains. Number 4. Brad Pitt shot a distracting cameo because it secured the movie's financing. 12 Years a Slave. 2013 slavery drama 12 Years a Slave rightly won the Best Picture Oscar, though it also received some pushback for a scene that many perceived as distracting. Brad Pitt makes a small cameo appearance in the film as Samuel Bass, a Canadian labourer who was instrumental in securing slave Solomon Northup's freedom despite his scant screen time. Many complained that the presence of an A-lister like Pitt in such a minor yet pivotal role was a bit of a misstep, with the assumption being that Pitt, who also produced the film and won an Oscar for doing so, handpicked the white saviour part for himself. Yet shortly after the film's release, Pitt was grilled about this and he answered very candidly that it was a purely practical decision related to the modern realities of film financing. He said, "Listen, the cold reality is this is difficult material to get made to get money for. The risk was me being a distraction in the film like this, and this was the best way to do what we needed to do to put the film together. So we quite honestly worked it out that way, and Steve didn't mind." Number 3. Wesley Snipes refused to shoot the fight scenes. Blade Trinity. It's not exactly a secret that Wesley Snipes was a major pain in the ass during the production of the third Bane movie, allegedly being unhappy with both the film's script and the appointment of series writer David S. Goyer as a director. According to Snipes' co-star Patton Oswalt, the actor spent much of the shoot holed up in his trailer smoking weed, only agreeing to hit the set when close-ups were needed to be filmed. As a result, an over-the-odds amount of the movie had to be shot with Snipes' stand-ins and stunt doubles, most notably all of the film's fight scenes. Beyond complicated and dangerous stunt setups, where doubles would be required anyway, doubles were used for the vast majority of Blade's fights, with Snipes only agreeing to film occasional close-up inserts. This is why the movie's fight scenes involving Blade look so choppy and rough, and why we rarely see Snipes in the midst of them. It's admittedly just one of the sequel's many problems, but if you thought this was simply a case of Goyer being an inexperienced director and struggling to make the action work in the editing room, the real culprit was an uncooperative Wesley Snipes. Number 2. The Rock's demanding WWE schedule ruined the CGI Scorpion King. The Mummy Returns. The Mummy Returns may have not been a particularly good movie, but pretty much all anyone can remember is the atrocious third act sequence in which Rick O'Connell faces off against the Scorpion King, a grotesque fusion of man and oversized scorpion. The visual effects work on this creature is bad, to be kind, less resembling Dwayne Johnson, more than a crude waxwork of him awkwardly pasted onto a 3D model from a PS2 game. Even back in 2001 it looked rough, and in a recent episode of Corridor Crew's VFX Artists React, the film's visual effects supervisor, John Burton Jr., talked about what went wrong with this scene. Burton explained that due to Johnson's busy WWE career, the VFX team weren't able to bring him in and scan his face in order to collect ultra-detailed reference material. As a result, the VFX artists were effectively left to figure it out for themselves, and without precise lighting and animation references to draw from, the results were staggeringly unconvincing. And number 1, 10 to 15% of the movie was never shot. The Snowman. 2017's adaptation of Joe Nesbo's hit thriller novel The Snowman was an absolute mess, with many viewers and critics complaining that the film was a largely disjointed slog that built into an incomprehensible car crash of an ending. The editing throughout the final sequence is incredibly choppy, and the speed at which the story bounces between characters and subplots in the third act suggests that something went very, very wrong during production. If you assume director Thomas Alfredson simply just hit a career slump, well, that's not entirely true. You see, shortly after the film's release, Alfredson spoke openly about the chaotic shoot, whereby he was effectively forced to release the film unfinished. According to Alfredson, pre-production was extremely rushed and shooting was curtailed enough that he was left unable to shoot about 10 to 15% of his script. He said, "Our shoot time in Norway was way too short. We didn't get the whole story with us, and when we started cutting, we discovered that a lot of it was missing. It was like when you're making a big jigsaw puzzle and a few pieces are missing, so you don't see the whole picture." Now think of your favorite movies and then consider 15% of it being missing. It might not ruin the entire film, but it would certainly ensure that your select sequences, perhaps even massively important ones, just wouldn't work.